Hey guys, welcome back to the Salt and Light Podcast. It's good to be together. It's also good to be recording an episode. We've had a busy couple weeks, so we apologize for the infrequency, but for those of you that are listening, thanks for hanging in there, believing in us. We're back to it.
Yeah.
Minus Graham. Isaac is joining us today
Plus
for our
Isaac.
listening audience only.
I almost said plus Kurt, but Kurt's always on.
Kurt,
Yeah.
Kurt's a mainstay.
I didn't realize you weren't Graham.
Yeah.
Okay.
In case you didn't know.
Yeah.
But yeah,
Here
we're back at it, and I feel bad sometimes.
When you miss, you mean?
I don't like when we miss because
No.
I think when we first started back up, we really didn't want to. The problem is, and I'll make excuses.
Yeah.
That we coordinating 4 people's schedules. Who knew? Turns out to be kind of tricky.
Really hard.
And so we have like this one block of time today on Wednesdays. And if we miss this, if this
Yeah.
gets taken up, we've
pretty
tried,
hard to do,
but it's pretty, the outlook is pretty dim.
And you disappoint our millions of listeners.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Time, yeah.
Yeah.
Hundreds
I
of
get it.
millions.
But I have faith in their
Stick to
grace.
Yeah, when they're going to come
stick-to-itiveness
back.
and their grace. Yeah.
Right.
Yeah.
Because we hear about it.
Yep.
Yeah, we hear about it when we're not there. But
What? I don't want to monopolize, but
yeah, go ahead.
so Jordan and I watched a movie the other night.
No, let's
And I
hear
know we
about
talk about movies
Yeah,
oftentimes.
this is Movie Corner.
And I feel like Isaac remoting in reminded me of it. But I feel like it's a movie you've definitely seen or will see. And it's The Accountant 2.
I haven't seen The Accountant 2.
Did you see The Accountant 1?
I did, but I can't remember it very well. I've
Yeah.
tried to bring it back.
Yeah.
Yeah.
So he's like
He's like a assassin of sorts, isn't he?
he's like an assassin, but he's, I'm assuming, autistic is the way they describe it, or the way. So his brain is just like super high functioning, and he thinks. But there's a cool element. You like remoting in with your phone reminded me. So part of why he's so effective in the movie, and it's oh my gosh, married to Jennifer Lopez.
Yeah, J-Lo, not anymore.
Not anymore,
Yeah.
but I can't. I just his name just went out of my head.
Oh, you want me to tell you who he
Yes,
is?
please, would you? Please help me out.
now he's friends with Jason Bourne.
Yes, Matt Damon and Ben Affleck.
Ben Affleck. There you go. Yeah.
There we go. And so in the movie, what part of what makes him so effective is there is this also super high functioning girl that works for him that's like nonverbal, but she communicates with like a computer voice, but she's like a hacker extraordinaire. So anything he needs, she was in the first movie, she was able to like hack into different places and get him information that he needs, which adds a really cool element. And then in this one, there's like a team of them. They're all these really high functioning people with different conditions, and they're all like insanely talented to hack into things, pull up what they need. And so it's a bit of a violent movie at times, but it was good. It was decent.
Yeah. That's what happens when you kill people. Things get violent. Yeah. Jordan like it?
Jordan did like it.
Yeah.
Jordan did like it. She liked the first one. But there was something about it that I couldn't get past. I think this is why I thought about not to rail on about The Accountant 2 for our listening audience, but there was in this one, and it's been so long since I watched the first one, is I thought of him in the first one as more of like a Jason Bourne like personality.
Yeah.
But in this one, and I don't know because I can't remember if they just like really leaned into the like autistic like part of him or whatever, but they made his character almost like goofy, like they were really leaning into like his quirks. And I don't
kind of like Rain Man or something.
Maybe even worse.
Yeah.
It was like they like made some like there was a bunch of like funnier parts, quote unquote, where like he'd do like goofy things because of how like type A and stuff like that he was. And I was just like it took away from like his level of like intensity and stuff. And I'm like, I didn't like it. It was like bothering me a little bit.
Yeah. It's interesting as we bring up Jason Bourne.
Yeah.
Because so the one scene where he he can't remember. This is the first one, and he's sitting with the gal, and he's in the diner, and he's saying of all the things that he's observing,
Right.
License plates. This guy can handle himself. So my wife and I were having this discussion about being in particular places, and if someone was to come in,
Yeah.
and I said to her, yeah, if someone came in, I'd take this chair and I'd go do all this kind of stuff, and she looked at me seriously. You think about that? And I said, yeah, and I said, she said she doesn't even consider that. I do that when I'm sitting in the church as well. What do I have? Mass shooter comes in. What do I do? I'm not going to run. I gotta do what I can down below. So she thought that was fascinating. But I think that happens with a lot of people.
Yeah.
When you sit and look, I don't like to have my back to the door.
So that's a really interesting one. I saw like a statistic about that. They polled like, I don't know how many people or whatever, and they asked about where, if you walked into a diner, and they had like a graph or a picture. If you walked into a diner, which seat at a table would you sit at? If all four were open, which one would you sit at? And it was like crazy, like 89 or 90 something % of men said that they'd sit in the chair across from the door, so that they were looking at the door, not their back towards the door. Right. And women, it was like all varied, like, depending on, well, this one's next to the window, or this one's next to, the I could see the waitress or whatever.
Right.
Yeah. And I thought that was kind of fascinating. What do you think? What do you think's behind that, Isaac?
I don't know. I don't think about that, but I don't know. Maybe
We're here for
how
you,
many of those men are married or in a relationship? Like, is that something they think about when that happens?
I would say there's a truth to that. That you'd be a little less concerned if you were on your own.
Because to me, I'm like, it doesn't matter. It's just I'll just sit in whatever seats.
Yeah.
Well, so we'll take this further. So this is an interesting psychological thing. So if I'm home with just my wife or with the family, compared to if I'm home alone, I have more, I don't know if fear is the right word, but when I hear something or whatever, and when I'm alone, I'm more fearful than when I have someone to protect.
Yeah.
Because then when you have someone to protect, you don't think about yourself.
Right.
Otherwise, you're.
That's a really good point, because you'd think, if you like looked at it logically, you'd think it would be the other way around. Well, I have people that I have to protect, so I have to be more on guard.
Right.
But it's not that way.
It's not that.
It's just your mind being moved from, like you said, distracted. It's just moved from one more important thing to another.
Yes.
Which I think there's some. That could be our segue. There's got to be some lessons in that.
Yeah, we should go.
It's a replacement. It's not thinking about being scared while you're alone. It's just replacement. It's a
even if you just had you and an infant, I would still be less concerned because it wasn't just about me. So that tracks over into. So here's the thing. If there's a catastrophic issue that goes on, I don't get wigged out about it. But if it's something that has to do with my own personal performance, I worry far more about that than I would have taken care of something larger. It's sort of the same thing.
Yeah, I could see that. Like, I think you get used to in leadership, like being ready to respond, maybe because it takes up more of your like mental energy. You put more thought into it or whatever.
You don't want to be poorly thought of, right?
So is that
right? I think that's probably the root of it.
Pride is enough of a driver that
it gets you more worked up than. So I would be. So if I had. If I had to make sure my workflows were good, I'd be more concerned about that than taking care of a large event,
Sure.
something like that.
Yep.
I just kind of would know what to do and how to address it,
Yeah.
rather than it just be my sole performance and how someone would look at me.
Yeah. Well, that probably ties into like the stats.
How come I'm the one who always confesses all my deep things on this show?
I don't know.
What's going on with that?
I don't know. Do you want me to
Okay.
confess stuff?
Oh, yeah, I do.
can think of-
I want you to bare your soul. I want to know what makes Isaac tick.
Yeah. There you go, Isaac.
Yeah.
What makes you tick?
Jesus.
There you go. Well, I think that probably is what plays into people being more afraid of like public speaking than death.
Yeah.
Is what polls say. Because like there's exposing that happens when you're like public speaking that
Yeah.
you feel incompetent or I don't know. Do you think practice or like experience, where is that like thinner?
Yeah. Well, so as you're saying, public speaking. So if so let's say that there's 3 topics of something that you had to go present about. One would be something you're very familiar with, you do all the time. One would be information you're trying to pass along that's necessary for people, but you're not necessarily that that engaged in it in that way. And then the other would be kind of, so the Jesus piece, I'm saying that you're very familiar with that too.
Yeah.
Because that might not be the case with some folks.
Sure.
But so let's say what am I kind of familiar with? So yeah, anything you let's say barefoot shoes, something like that I had looked into a lot. I could just kind of vamp on that,
Right.
for instance. I could with passion explain the gospel and Jesus and my own thoughts on how the kingdom should look, and so I wouldn't have much of a problem with that. But more so, even not how I'd be seen, but that it's Jesus in me that's motivating it. So it's His power that's doing it. But then something in the middle, me explaining PCO to a group, something
Yeah.
like that, I'd be less confident about that.
Sure. Yeah, there's almost even a 4th category where it's something you don't feel super confident in, but it's like it matters to you more. Because
Yeah.
like if you were asked to give a demonstration about like planning center in our database, I don't know if you'd get super stressed because you don't care.
Yeah.
So there's that. There's that element of it.
Well, so here's something I wouldn't be an expert on, but I'd be highly opinionated on, right? So if we were to have a conversation right now about trans males in female high school sports, I'd go off on you.
Sure.
You know, because I'd be passionate about that, but I wouldn't be an expert on it at all.
Right.
Right. Yeah. Yeah. So there's the kind of that like piece of it. I was thinking it's also interesting how pride is such a bizarre thing where it would make somebody fearful to public speak initially. Then as they do it, it would transition into them feeling a sense of worth from doing it and almost like celebrated. And then pride becomes another at first it's a barrier.
Yeah.
Then it becomes a danger and almost a hurdle, because then I think about that when we're public speaking, a lot of pastors and people in ministry and things start off with very, very humble hearts and good intentions. And then that, if you're not careful and not abiding and not surrounded with people that can help you, then that's just such a pitfall for
right. So
pride.
so you just preached last week, but even not preaching, you've done worship up front. So that whole idea of you being the focal point of a couple thousand people doesn't freak you out at all.
No,
Nor myself.
Yeah.
So you've just started hanging out on stage with your guitar.
Yeah.
If you had to come up and say a few words, would
I think I could now. So I definitely think it takes some, experience doing
Yeah.
it and like being in front of people and doing it. Like for me, like praying in staff meeting, even like where it's just us as a staff.
Yeah.
Like I know all of you, but
Yeah.
I was still so nervous because I'm like, well, what if I like,
Yeah.
like you can't mess up a prayer, but still
Yeah.
that thought goes through of like, what if I mess up the prayer, or stumble over my words, or like, what are people going to think about my prayer? Is it even good? But it's like, it doesn't matter. Like no one's going to care if I
Right.
pray, it's just about me and Jesus. And it's like, I'm just expressing my heart to Jesus in front of, these people and praying about something maybe I'm thinking about or passionate about or something God put on my heart. And it's like, once I got over that hurdle, it was like, now I feel like I'm not nervous to pray,
Yeah.
But even like with speaking, like, like the first few times being on stage, even just at rehearsals, like I was like nervous and like
Yeah.
freaking out beforehand. And I'm like, oh, what if I mess up? But then after doing it a few times and then being on the stage in front of people, like it definitely helps.
So you get used to it. So here's the thing that I almost disagree with. You always hear it all the time that public speaking is like the biggest fear people have, and I don't seem to get that impression that
For people that have that fear, it's like really bad. I've noticed that, which I think we are in a circle of people who are very used to it because a lot of us like present in some form or another.
I feel like if I grabbed anyone out of our congregation on a Sunday, brought them up and said, tell me about your family growing up or something like that, your brother and sister, I feel like most of them could handle that.
Yeah.
Maybe I'm wrong, but to the point where they say it's the greatest fear, like beyond death. For
Yeah,
some
I mean,
people,
that's
that
just like
seems
a
odd to me.
checkbox poll.
Yeah.
Like, what do you
Right.
fear the most? I'll say this: my dad has a like intense fear of public speaking, and he had to like present something at work once or something like that, and he was like sick, like physically ill for like days before. It was really, I remember, and he would tell you to this day, like if he gets like super crazy nervous. And I think I find this really funny, but he'll feel secondhand nervousness for me.
Oh, yeah.
So
I bet.
yeah, he will, my parents will come down, which is really sweet. They'll come down, like if I'm leading worship or sharing the message or whatever, they'll come down to be with us and support and get to come and see. And, like it's way better now, but like when the first couple times that I done it, he would be like really nervous for me in the morning. And I just was like, but you don't have to do it. And so I'd like comfort and say, it's okay. It's all right. Like, and I mean, there's that times where I feel nervous, but I found it interesting. People used to ask me that it must be really, really scary to sing in front of people. And though that, I don't know, it could be true, I actually found initially singing was way less nerve-wracking than speaking because it's somebody else's words. The words are already
you don't have to help with
determined.
it. No, that's a big difference.
Sharing
Yeah.
your own thoughts, I
Yeah.
think, is more
Yes.
exposing.
Yeah.
Or whatever. But yeah, we were talking, to segue a little bit, we were talking in men's group this morning on my Wednesday group about just this, because we're going through Acts now. So we're in Acts 3 today and just watching kind of the tie I keep trying to make is the being with Jesus resulting in the going out and doing with Jesus. And it can't be backwards, but sometimes we stop.
Yeah.
We do the first part, we don't do the second part. And I think in the same way, there is this element of if it comes out of the overflow, then there's way less of us that gets mixed in. And I think that's same with like sharing with, say, a message on Sunday mornings, or even if it's like a lot of our teams and stuff do like huddles for their serve teams and things like that. And when you're sharing for those, if it comes out of the overflow, it's almost to your same point about being nervous at home. It's a replacement of, and it just people are way less nervous when it comes out of like sharing something that they're excited about or whatever. And it doesn't feel like this striving to come up with something clever.
Right.
Because we've talked about that.
We have,
like,
yes.
Like the unspoken weight to be like, well, I've got to have a great story or allegory or something clever or funny to share on a Sunday. And that can really get in your head as you're preparing versus just like sometimes you want to just put on get really amped up talking about Jesus with people and then turn on like a voice recorder and just like go off on a rant and be like, that's what it's going to be. Because that came out of the overflow, you know?
Yeah.
But yeah.
Isaac, what are you hesitant to do, but you know you should do in your life?
Wow. Hesitant to do, but should do.
Yeah. Is there something you feel like, well, this is something I got to do, but I really don't want to? Not necessarily being confrontational with somebody. That's not really what I'm talking about.
Man, I don't know. Probably. I don't know. Here's a question.
Yeah.
Are we, per scripture, are we supposed to like evangelize? Like everyone's supposed to go out and evangelize to the masses, right?
Well,
So that's
is that
something
what
I would
you're
say,
thinking?
yeah, is like I probably should be out and doing that more, or even just like in normal day things. Like if I see something asking like, hey, do you need prayer? Or just, even just that.
That's an interesting point, though. Are we supposed to? Because I would say yes, but I think sometimes, especially in evangelical Christianity, it's elevated almost to a point that if you're kind of not doing it in a particular way, almost, you're not fulfilling what God wants for you, and that's not necessarily what you find. You find that we are to go out. So let's look at Matthew 28, right? Go out and make disciples of all nations, teaching them everything that Jesus has commanded us. But when we look at evangelizing, we often think of it as convincing somebody.
Right.
And it's not necessarily that. It's just putting it out there. And Mark, the end is go out and preach the gospel to all nations. In John, it's sort of just Jesus, just as I have done, you go and do. A little bit of a different deal. Luke is stay around until you receive power from on high, and then you're gonna go out and do these things. So it's all a little bit, but then the actual engagement piece that you find in Peter and then in Colossians, they're kind of similar. Basically, be prepared in season and out of season to give a reason for the hope you have.
Yeah,
which is a little bit less where you have to have a prepared statement to do it. Because that's what I find when people think they got to have a package to deliver, then it gets pretty robotic.
Right.
Yeah.
And I've seen that happen a lot. And I was party to that at one time.
Yeah, no, I think we all feel that.
Yeah.
Well, the first scripture that you shared from Matthew 28, the go out and make disciples of all nations. That even, I think when you talk to people, oftentimes they think like what you're thinking or what you were bringing up, Isaac, the idea of like, am I supposed to go out and evangelize? We think about that always as street evangelism, that you're going to go out and forcibly go up to strangers, talk to them, share the gospel with them, have them pray the sinner's prayer, and then convert them. And I think that's what's in most people's head. But I would argue, as we unpack making a disciple is like teaching them to follow Jesus as we follow Jesus. And that's like such an ongoing idea. You don't make a disciple in an afternoon.
No.
So there's this, to me, people always think of strangers that they have to go and fulfill Matthew 28 with, but really it's all of those in our life. And so I think that would actually probably make people feel a lot better if they understood that. Like Well, yes, maybe that is somebody that you run into and God puts in front of you and you have a conversation, and you don't want to
Right.
you want to be ready in season and out of season to share the hope that you have. But more so, making disciples is those that are in our sphere. Those are the
Yeah.
people that we interact with and engage.
Right, and then if you broke it down into two more pieces, so in the Greek, the inclination or what it's trying to get across to you is as you go, make disciples.
Right.
So you're not, some should, go missions and that sort of thing. Paul did that. But in Jesus' vernacular there is wherever you go, like
Right.
you're saying. But then as well, in Jesus' disciple-making method, it was basically come alongside of me and just
Right.
be with me.
Yeah.
And see what I do, and you do it, rather than we think make disciples is give them a course and step them through it, where it's,
Sure.
it's mostly hanging out with
Yeah.
each other.
Yeah, definitely.
So maybe I am doing that because, like I guess I'm thinking about like evangelism. Is that the way that I'm living around the people that, whether or not they're Christian, like, is that in a way evangelizing of like showing them like, hey, this is how I live? Because
Right.
whether it's like not swearing or acting certain ways in certain situations, and then like, is that evangelizing? Because eventually from that could a conversation arise of like, hey, why don't you say this or do this? Like, why do you live this
Yeah.
way?
I think when you look in the Sermon on the Mount, and first he gives us what the character of a follower of Jesus should look like in the Beatitudes. So if we adopted every one of those things, we'd have that character. And then just at the end of it, he says, we don't, if you got a light, you don't put a bucket over it or anything. But then he says, but you let your light shine before men, so that they'll see your good works and glorify your Father in heaven. So it's not, again, with an evangelism side, we have to say the right thing.
Right.
You got to include this, this, and this. And he's saying, let your light shine. And that shining, or what you'd find from every one of those aspects of the Beatitudes, are going to be so effective that people will then glorify God just from looking at the way you comport yourself, the way you love when you're around them. And I think Jesus, by far, just like in those commandments where he says, I've come to fulfill the commandments, he's come to correctly interpret the commandments. And so in doing that, he's saying all these commandments have to do with love. Likewise, our shining light is love, and people are going to recognize that, how we go about that. And that's probably what will change minds. People need to hear that I don't agree with whatever is assigned to St. Francis of Assisi that says, spread the gospel, and if you have to use words, it's both and.
Yeah.
Love can't come without words quite often.
Yep.
Yeah. No, we love to quote things like that to give us an excuse or an
Yes.
out or whatever. Yeah. Well, hey, I will share. You asked me to share some of my
Come on, yeah. Give me
shortcomings or whatever.
Some deep Jake stuff.
which it overlaps this conversation. So you know that so I'll just share like you don't know because of our listening audience. So we once a year in the summer, a group from USM, the professor at the USM counseling and
something like
is it
that.
just
Yeah.
counseling and
it's a,
therapy or
it's a graduate program.
a graduate program for counselors. She'll have, her name's Susan, she'll have like a class of 20 or so,
about that, yeah.
15, 20 students that will go for like a week. They'll go and visit different places of faith. So they'll visit churches, they'll visit mosques.
Because those are ultimately might be their clients.
Right.
So
and they want to be
understand,
familiar with things of faith for their eventual clients or whatever. And so Kurt's done that for years. There was one year he was out, so I jumped in, and then we both did it together last year. And so there's a plan. They're going to come back this summer. And it is a very intense few hours with people who are not as aligned like-minded as we are, and so there's a lot of very, I'll say, aggressive conversation that happens, and it's good. It like ultimately, I've always felt feeling like very encouraged and things like that. But it's very much a defense of our faith, a defense of our values, defense of the way we do things.
To the point of the aggressive piece, this is what's funny that
Yeah.
I find quite often when doing it is they'll be so unaligned with the way we think,
Yes.
that they'll be almost hostile at times.
Yes.
And by the time the 2 to 3 hours is over with, though, before they leave, pretty regularly someone will come up and apologize for being that way.
Multiple apologies
Yeah.
every year so far because of a group.
Yeah.
And I mean, to the point where last year, Susan said the very first thing, she walked in the building and she comes up to Kurt and I and kind of leans in and whispers, she goes, "I hope you guys brought your bulletproof vests." And so it's like this really intense time of almost like, it feels a little bit like interrogation. But I think God moves through it, and it's certainly good for me.
Yeah. Recommend it for everyone.
Definitely,
Yeah.
definitely. It would certainly like make people very uncomfortable to be a part of it. As this is what I'm sharing, as it does me.
Yeah.
And so I saw the email come through, and immediately I was like, "Oh, okay, yep." I had to like everything in me wanted to be like, "No, thanks."
You weren't quick on the response.
I wasn't quick.
That.
Well,
No?
and yeah, and that's not why, but I was checking the calendar and stuff, but it definitely internally I was like, oh, okay, that's, and it could have been the state of mind or whatever, and so I had to like remind myself like, this is avoiding something like this is total polar opposite to what we're talking about.
Yeah,
This is like, be ready, and I should be thankful at the opportunity where people who are far from God, or I can't really even say that because I don't know. We're all, and there it's a wide variety of people, but like by appearances and by their comments seem far from God, that are willingly coming into the building and asking some of the best questions of exploration of Christianity. That it's like, what an opportunity, and God's always worked in it, and so it's like I should be thankful for that opportunity instead of like dreading the brief moment. It's not like I'm gonna get like physically beaten or anything like that.
And their questions aren't, did Moses really have an ark? They're cultural mores of the day that we might appear to be rather what's the word? Just slipped my mind. Kind of puritanical, sort of from them.
Yeah, definitely cultural changes, and
But so then the thing is, how do you answer that well and clearly, not compromisingly?
Right, and I think that's a big piece that I've had to allow myself to give over to, and then ask God to help me with in that situation. But it's helped with other situations as well. Is there's a bit when our values or our beliefs are challenged, there's something in us that can rear up that's almost becomes defensive from not a gentle or like submitted place. It's from well, I don't want to be wrong, or I don't want to be embarrassed. I want to be right. And I think like wrestling with that feeling, and then kind of giving that over to the Lord and overcoming that, where it's not about being right. I need to be transparent and share the truth apart from myself and let God defend himself. I don't need to get angry or aggressive and like back, because that's not my call. That's not the reason why I need to do what I need to do. So I think that's helped. Being put in almost like a pressure cooker in those environments has definitely helped in other environments where it's not quite as intense, to just really have good perspective, to just say, here's, I think somebody said it well once when we were out in Colorado. They said, and sometimes I even bring it up and share, that until somebody everything that we believe and walk in is based on the fact of who Jesus is. Like everything's founded on that. And so our foundation for truth is Jesus and who he is and all of that. And so the rest of the world has all varying foundations for truth. So if their truth is based on themselves, then there's no way for us to be aligned because we're not agreeing that truth comes from one thing. And so the person had just, they were talking about evangelism. They said, until somebody can come to an agreement with me on who Jesus is, then there's no point in going after lifestyle or things like that. You can share about what Jesus says about those things, but they have to submit to who Jesus is first, then their foundation for truth. Then you can say, well, if Jesus is who he says he is, and that's what you say is true, then here's the correction of beliefs about truth or whatever.
And so when we're encountering them, you have sort of empathy for who they are, because just as we're transformed by the renewing of our minds to come to the understanding of Jesus and the power, and then because we're transformed, we then get to experience his power.
Right.
These folks do not.
Right.
And so they're thinking all of our foundation is based on some kind of moral stance.
Right.
And they would then take the moral stance and say, well, culturally, the morality changes, whereas with Jesus, everything stays the same.
Right.
And so you understand where they're coming from, because their mind they've been transformed by the renewing of their mind in that way of renewal, which I would think, boy, if you didn't have Jesus to be the filter of all those things, and all you heard was what you see on the news and what the protests are and all those, anybody who's just coming through a scholarship of high school and college right now, I don't know how you couldn't fall into that unless your family unit was pretty well structured.
Right. Well, and by and large, I think with that group, but even culturally, what we're the biggest piece is identity, right? So, in all the different elements that go along with that, but when their belief about their identity comes from something other than Jesus, any threat to that truth becomes not only a showcasing of truth, it's a direct attack on them as a person, which is just such a clever thing of the enemy to get people to adhere and fall under that belief that their identity is X, Y, or Z, because then you can't hear what Jesus says about anything, any topic, and not feel personally attacked. And it's like, oh, well, those things are not, the truth is those things are not our identity. And so when you can separate that out, then it doesn't leave the person feeling attacked or unwanted by Jesus. And so I'm just always blown away by the cruelty and cleverness of the enemy to wrap that all up.
Yep. He'll never stop.
Nope.
Yeah. Until he's locked up.
That's right.
Yeah.
Yeah. Well, Isaac, thanks for joining us.
Yeah.
Yeah, of course.
Thanks for being here. And yeah, thanks for being with us, guys. As you go this week, just be reminded of what your identity is in Jesus and look to him and live in the freedom that surrendering to God's truth instead of trying to come up with one for your own brings in your life. So have a great week, and we'll see you next time.
You bet.